Welcome to the Infinity Academy from the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most important and often controversial aspects of Infinity: table setup. With the nature of Infinity involving the ability to react to enemy actions, being able to utilize terrain to allow movement, cover and board control are essential. When you then factor in the mission-based nature of the game, featuring consoles and scenery elements which win or lose the game, and this importance becomes even clearer. First, however, some general notes on table setup and terrain. There are many factors which impact tables, including mission, game size, player experience, and the type of game. Friendly games looking very different to ITS tournament ones. You're going to need quite a bit of terrain of varying sizes and shapes and plenty of scatter. Scatter being these smaller scale pieces which let miniatures gain partial cover rather than hiding them completely. There's no such thing as a perfect table or setup. Anyone that tells you there is has probably only played within a small group or area. This is all subjective and revolves a lot around personal taste and how your local players play. So only take the advice and guidance in this video as just that, advice. Apply it or ignore it as you see fit. It's also worth saying that your table and table design should move and develop over time. This is where I upset some table owners. I love and respect the process of creating a fixed, dedicated terrain layout. There's no doubt that it gives the best aesthetic results. Designing a city, designing a space station or something like that, creating a dedicated space is fantastic, but it also pins down the layout of the table. This means that there's a limit to the ways in which the table plays. If you play that style of table repeatedly, then over time you'll learn how to play that table, where the angles and best spots are. If you're building a new table with each game, then you lose that advantage, and figuring out the best way to play the table becomes part of your skill set. Overall, that will make you a better player as you're always looking for the best angles and positions of your troops, a skill which is highly recommended. Table sizes vary depending on the size of army you're taking. These are, for a 150 points game, you'll need a 24 inch by 32 inch table. For 200 to 250 points, you'll need a 32 inch by 48 inch table. And for 300 or 400 point games, you'll need the full 48 inch by 48 inch gaming table. 48 inches is 4 feet, so those terms can be used interchangeably, and for that 300 point game you will be using a 4 foot by 4 foot mat. For smaller games we use the same 4 foot by 4 foot mat, but use something like non-sticking tape to mark off the area that we're not playing. A flick through the Infinity N4 rulebook will reveal the recommended process for setting up your table. In essence, Corvus Belli recommends that your tables look like this. With variants depending on table size, the key takeaways include: your table will be a mix of large, small and scattered terrain. The large terrain is more useful if it includes parapets, windows, recesses and roofs which players can use. They should also be accessible using ladders or elevators to encourage players to use other levels. Gaps between large terrain should be no more than 10 inches. Small terrain is used to cover within these gaps. Avoid having bottlenecks and blind alleys. Boards should be asymmetric, with one side having clear tactical advantages over the other. This last point of asymmetry is arguably one of the most important skills to master when learning to make tables. When starting a game, players will roll off to decide who gets to choose either turn order or board edge and deployment. Being able to pick who goes first and who goes second can be incredibly powerful in Infinity, with some armies able to strike quickly enough to cripple their opponent in the first turn. This is balanced by having a table which confers a benefit to the player who can choose the table edge by giving one side a clear advantage in cover and firing angles over the other. So if you get to go first, you may get the jump on your opponent, but they'll be ready for you. In today's video we're going to be setting up two tables, one for beginners and one for an ITS tournament grade of game. Whilst the card terrain packs which are available from Corvus Belli and come in these 2-player initiation sets are great for 150 point games, not everyone has them. Plus, For those wishing to start at higher point levels, it's worth discussing how to set up more newbie-friendly spaces. You'll see that the beginner table is denser and flatter than the ITS one. This is because, for newbies, getting the process of the game, spending orders, shooting, moving, etc., is way more important than making detailed tactical choices. With that said, there are some core ideas to keep in mind when setting up your tables. Some of these shouldn't be applied to newbie tables, and I will mention those as we go along. First, your table is a canvas on which the game is played, not the third player. If there is a universal golden rule of infinity terrain, then this one is as close as we get. By this we mean to say that your terrain setup should create interesting tactical choices, not limit the players to making bad decisions. That's where finding your balance of terrain, fire lanes, cover, routes and choke points becomes important. This takes time. You will make tables where the setup influences the game in a way that you didn't foresee. You'll make a table where players can only get to an objective on one route, creating a forced blood path, or a sniper point which controls the whole table, or accidentally leave a flyer lane from one deployment zone to the other. These will happen and are why it's crucial that both players check that they are happy with the board before the game begins. Asymmetry is king. As Corvus Belli said, ensure that one side has a clear advantage over the other. This is one which shouldn't be used for newbie games of 200 points or lower, however. Do note, taking advantage is not dominance. While the advantageous side should be better, it shouldn't control the table completely, just limit the options of the attacking player. And build for tactical options. Your table should have environments which are perfect for a missile launcher. This is a weapon which comes into its own over 24 inches. Your table should also have spaces where a 10-inch template, like the chain rifle, is powerful. Having a table which has a denser part and less dense part is key here. That way, no matter which army you're playing, you'll have options. Not so important for new player tables, as these will be inherently denser by design, but important to keep in mind as you progress to more and more complex games. What you don't want to do is find yourself on a table where you have a sniper rifle who spends the entire game unable to do anything, and likewise, you don't want to face an opponent with a sniper rifle who locks down your entire board. Areas of dead ground don't exist in your game. That is to say, areas with no cover or which are only accessible by spending multiple orders to climb up won't, as a rule, be used by most players, so they become a no-go zone and reduce the playing space available. Avoid this at all costs. Deployment zones need thought. It's no fun to be slaughtered before you've had your first turn. Ensure that both deployment zones have enough terrain to deploy troopers in total cover. Also, we recommend breaking up the line of fire across the back edge of the deployment zone. This will avoid an enemy unit which can be deployed in your deployment zone, running amok, and doing too much damage. Again, this isn't so important for newbie tables, but as you get more advanced, it'll become more important. Consider your mission. This is not important at all for new player tables, but if you're playing a mission with a line of consoles down the middle of the board, for example, then sticking a huge river down the middle of the table is a non-starter. Also, building terrain in a way which favours one player heavily can ruin the game. For example, if the mission is to retrieve boxes from the midline, like the ITS mission supplies, and one player is unable to deploy in a way to cover those boxes, then you're handing the other player a huge advantage before the game begins. Check before you start. This was mentioned above, but before you set up your minis, before you make your lieutenant roll-off, take a minute to make sure you're happy with the table setup all the way around. That way, before the dice is thrown, you can spot the dirty great fire lane or the dead ground in the middle of the board. So check it over and discuss making adjustments with your opponent before anyone has chosen a board edge. Don't worry too much about this in your first games. Being blunt, you won't know what you're looking for. So it's better to get on with the game than to spend 40 minutes looking for every fire lane and debating if it's, air quotes, a bad one. In between shooting the start of this video and the end of this video, the new Blackwind starter box for Code 1 arrived. Because that contained a starter set of terrain, I decided to actually put that in so you guys can have a look at it, but also just to chat through what that's like and let you see how it is. So
that's being added in. There's actually going to be 3 tables that we discuss rather than the originally planned 2. Yay, bonus.
For our first terrain setup, we're going to start off where a lot of you will, which is with the terrain set that comes with a 2-player starter set for Code 1 for Infinity. These cardboard terrain sets are great, they're a fantastic place to begin. The mat that you can see there, the paper mat, is 24 inches by 36 inches, so it's part of a table, and a few demo games, a few starting games, it will do the job perfectly. The setup is actually in the player guide that you get with this set. So literally you just need to follow the instructions and it will walk you through to play your introduction games with the contents of the box. Is this going to teach you much about how you set up a more advanced game? No. This table is suitable for 150 points, just getting started, learning the basics when you're focusing on picking up the basics of the rules. These will do a fantastic job, and actually the terrain itself is made from good quality card. It's quite thick, very tough. So I have and do use the card terrain that I've got with other sets on larger Infinity tables. You'll see that probably later with the table that we set up. But yeah, as a starting point, as a place for you to begin, this is great, and it doesn't take a great deal of setting up at all, so absolute bonus.
For our next table setup, we're going to work through another beginner table. Now, this is very different from the one that you've just seen, which comes with the 2-player starter sets. That's a smaller scale, it's designed for those 150 point games as we discussed. This table is for the more common type of wargamer that I come across, which is the impatient one, the one that wants to get deep into the rules really quickly and wants to play on a, air quotes, proper table and all that kind of stuff. So you can set this up as either a 36 inch by 48 or a 48 by 48 table. We can set this up by a full 48 by 48 table. It's different from how I would set up a full tournament table. You'll see that in the next section of this video. So what I'm going to do is quickly talk about what we're going to do, the basic principles, so you know what you're watching. Then I'm going to show a time lapse of me putting this table together, and then show you some close-ups of how it looks and the different angles from the different deployments, so you get a feel of how that looks and the theory behind the science behind the theory. So first of all, we're going to be using this District 5 game mat from Microsoft Studio. This is the mouse mat material, hard wearing. I'd recommend having something like that for the base of a decent table. We'll be doing a proper review of this kind of thing later, but if you're going to have a table, that type of mat not only makes it look more cohesive, makes it look like a real place, but it also protects your minis a little bit when they take a tumble, means that your dice don't clatter across the table so much, although having said that, a lot of guys roll in the building tops. And you'll see on the far side, all of this terrain over here is going to be turned into a table on here with some additional bits and pieces from card sets from Corvus Belli, but that set on the other side of the table is most of a District 5 starter set from Microsoft Studios again. Obviously it matches the table. We're doing that kind of thing, getting this pre-painted stuff. If you're a newbie, you're just coming into the hobby and you want to throw some money at a table, I would recommend you check them out, because a couple of hours of gluing stuff together and you have a beautiful table that's ready to play on and be immersed into. So I'd recommend considering doing that. And also it actually ties in pretty well, as you'll see, with some of the Corvus Belli terrain that you do get with things like Blackwind or Crimson Stone, those 2-player starters. So the theory, first of all, in later Academy videos, we're going to talk about learning to play Infinity in the first games you're going to play. Those are going to be very restricted, where you're using a very finite number of different options in the game rather than the full rules. That's to avoid you getting swamped. Also, to help with that, I'd recommend that this type of beginner table is very low level. There's no real height to it. So keep it relatively flat, keep the file lanes relatively short, keep the sides relatively balanced, whereas a full table will be asymmetric, as we've discussed. This table won't be, this will be quite symmetric. Your first few games of Infinity are most beneficial when you focus on the how to play, on the what your core ideas are, how the dice rolls work, how you spend an order, how you figure out shooting and all this kind of stuff, rather than looking at all the tactical options and details on the table. That will come later, but this type of table should facilitate you learning the rules and getting comfortable with the processes which are going to be essential to you being a successful Infinity player. So, as I say, this table will be a little bit different to a tournament grade table, but hopefully you'll get an idea of what I mean, and I'll walk you through how it is set up when it's done. So here we go. Okay then guys, so here you have it. This is very much a beginner table. This is something that I would recommend for a first set of games when you're just getting to learn the basics of the rules. You'll have noticed at the start of the video things changed slightly. I put down this tape. This marks the boundary of the deployment zone, just so you can get an idea, a more clear visual idea of what is and isn't inside. As I said before we started this, the table is set up pretty symmetric. So you will see there is one building inside the deployment zone here and a matching one there. We have one part in the deployment zone and another one there. We've got various bits and pieces of full line of sight blocking terrain in both, here and over there, and some partial cover in both as well. So the idea is that when you're playing your first few games, you're going to need to learn processes and key concepts and how the game feels. And if you're spending too much time worrying about, did I choose the right side? Did I take the right building? Did I deploy in the right spot? All this kind of stuff, then it can become a bit of an overload. So to avoid that, we set everything up nice and symmetric, keep things nice and simple, and yeah, you can get on with learning the game. You'll see that there are only 2 points of height here. We have one sniper spot here and a matching one here, again one on each side of the table. But for beginner games, I wouldn't recommend that you play anything like infiltration that will get you up the board, or forward deployment. So with a limited number of orders in the structure that we use for teaching Infinity at the Dice Gods, you would normally start off a beginner game with 7 orders. You're not going to have enough orders to get from your deployment zone all the way up the stairs, around the back, over the top, into there, and then start taking shots. It's just not efficient. You're going to spend your whole turn doing that, and likelihood you're going to get sniped doing it yourself, so it's not really worth it. That's by design. When we're playing here, spending orders, even at 200 points, this is still the layout that I would go for. The first turn or so will be moving up the board and approaching your enemy. If you've not played Infinity before, even if you've played other war games for years, if you've not played Infinity before, it's worth having that first turn where you get the process concepts down, spending an order and what orders can do and what different skills are available to you. So you can spend more time getting used to that than thinking tactically and adding more bits and pieces of complexity in for that first turn, because you're just going to be moving up the board. So that's the core concepts of it. I will take some video now to show you fire lanes and the process from each side. One last thing that's worth mentioning is you'll see here this building, and on the other side behind that building there is something that blocks the deployment zone. It cuts it, stops you being able to get to one side and just rampage clean across. In your beginner games that won't matter so much, but when you get into later games where you have airborne deployment and infiltrators that can get really in your face really quickly, it's good to be in the habit of making sure that they are restricted in what they can do in your deployment zone or in your enemy's deployment zone, so they don't get too overpowered. Right, I'm going to take some video and probably chat at you some more about this beginner table, but that's it. And for our last table, we are going to set up a full 4x4 tournament grade, if you will, table. So that is going to be somewhat different than the ones we've seen before. So as we talked about in the intro, we're going to have an area of more density, an area of less density. We're going to have an advantageous side and a disadvantageous side. We are going to have a place that's going to favour template weapons and another one that's going to favour your snipers, missile launchers and HMGs. So again, we'll switch to a time lapse and run through that. So here we have it then. The table is all set up. I'll just walk you through what we've got here. On this side we've got a little bit more open. This is going to be more beneficial to the snipers of this world. Sniper point here, here and here. Whereas this side is a little bit more dense for approaching with template weapons. This is a little bit more viable to get up. Although there are some lines of fire through there, as you can see. It's not completely locked down and dense. There are some options there. But when we look, lines of fire through here, down through here from this position, almost into the enemy deployment zone, right down the end. So, could probably do a little bit more terrain at certain points, or a little bit of rejigging. It might look dense, but when you actually start getting down to eye height with it, there's lots of long lines of fire down here, through here. So this side would be the advantageous side. Just skip around there. So this is our advantageous side. We've got terrain that you can deploy directly into in the deployment zone. Again, we can't go from one side to the other. There is blocking terrain down here, just there. So there is your deployment zone. So if you're going second, you're going to get some good shots from here, from this sniper point here, this one here, but not dominant. Even if you come here, look across the board, there's no full lines of fire, and where you're at risk, we've got these to block off what's going on. So there you go. You can cover a degree of this approach, but certainly not all of it. So for our disadvantageous side, the side where you'll probably go in first, we do have cover, and we do have total cover. We do have a building here, which you'll be able to deploy into. As you can see, it's well inside the deployment zone. In fact, it's quite far back. It does have overwatch from that building above though. So if you deploy in here and your opponent has infiltrators or anything like that, you are running the risk that they're going to get a down angle shot onto you. Not ideal. This also is in the deployment zone, this big building here. You can see, just in, but the lines here, so you can get cover here, but you're going to have to start in fresh air almost anywhere beyond that line. So no deploying into here unless you have the forward deployment, but that's going to be fairly well covered from the sniper points opposite, so sticking a low morph in there is a move for somebody with their brave pants on. There you go. So even though this is an asymmetric board, there are advantages to starting here. You have a good way of approaching up through here. You have cover up to the midline here, cover up to the midline here. This little sticky out bit is actually for airborne deployment, so that AD can come in without getting slaughtered. Likewise over here, these points on the edge of the boxes here, you can come in without dying straight away. So yeah, I think this table is almost right. I think it needs a little bit of a rejig, but as a concept, I think you can see what we're going for, or I hope you can see what we're going for. There are some kill zones, but none of them are completely dominant. I mean, even when we look at this line through here, it's a huge line, all the way technically down into the deployment zone if you get the right angle. There are things that can be done about it. You've got overwatch from these two buildings here, that one over there, this one here. Anyone coming this way is going to get that shot, but at what cost? There you have it. That is the type of table that I would set up for a tournament. Although it looks busy, although it looks dense, there are still plenty of tactical options for long-range weaponry, for short-range weaponry, and it's that balance that is important, I think. Getting yourself in a situation where you have ways around clear bits on the table, open spaces or too dense places. So you can pick your engagement and, as you'll hear in later videos, give your opponent no good choices while giving yourself nothing but.
So that's our guide to setting up tables for Infinity N4. As we mentioned at the start, these are our recommendations and your mileage will vary. Just like list writing, this is a highly subjective process, and we'd love to hear how you do it in the comments section below. More Infinity Academy coming soon, but that's everything for today, so please like, subscribe, and consider sharing this with your fellow gamers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.